So I wanted to jump in and just give you a little bit of background on myself because it kind of ties into what we're talking about. 30 years ago or so, I started working in marketing and sales, and it was before computers, before digital and so forth. But I came to Vegas 20 years ago, and AT&T started to get into the business of getting people online, getting them on Google, taking money out of the phone book and so forth. So my job was to go into the Las Vegas market and open it up, bring salespeople in, and educate the community. So the reason I bring that up is because the benefits of businesses and the things that they look to do is all about buying behavior. If you think about your business or if you think about the things that you do, the buying behaviors of what each individual buyer or each individual consumer of what you do is what you need to recall. So think about that in a digital standpoint. Think about the idea that when people go to Google or when people go to a website, what are they first looking for? You know, in websites, you might think about bounce rate. How long can somebody stay on the website before it breaks out? And those are the kinds of things that I think about. So when we're talking about digital marketing back in 2005, 6, 7, 8, it was really all about that, getting everybody educated and so forth about that. And now fast forward. So think about GPTs as an extension of Google. Think about how people actually integrate their thinking into a model now where they don't have to do the homework. They don't have to go to 4 or 5 different websites on Google to figure out what the answer is. And even then, they don't know. So what I talk to people about is, okay, let's evolve your business. Let's think about where you want to go and what you want to do. And if you want to actually grow your business and you want consumers to find something like the low-hanging fruit, what exactly is it that you offer that you maybe want to get more of? And in that case, we look at that and we start learning how to prompt. In businesses that the Chamber has, we have thousands of members. Everybody across the board, whether you sell pizzas or whether you're a motivational speaker, there are things that each individual business needs to better understand. And I think that's one, I think everybody knows that, but I don't think they understand how to get there, and that's where the GPT model works. And of course, in 3, 4, 5 years, and maybe a shorter period of time than that, they're going to talk about machine learning. You're going to be talking about the applications in ways that people never anticipated. So you think about business needs, and you think about, I'll use an example. If they're in the business of global business, for example, they do business here in trade and exporting and so forth, but they're also in Asia, they're also in Australia. Well, that's kind of where I play too. And the Vegas brand is a global brand, and so is the Vegas Chamber. We're one of the biggest chambers in the country. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through a little bit of what the Chamber does, because some of the things that we do, most people don't realize. So when we talk to companies coming in from California, they're coming in with an idea of, well, you're just like another neighborhood chamber. You're just like Inland Empire, you're just Riverside and so forth. So we kind of have to back up and we have to explain that we're one of 3 chambers in the country that represent the state from a metro level when it comes legislatively. We're also the arm that represents the state of Nevada and Washington, D.C. We bring in about 300 people to that each and every year. So some of the things about Vegas, and this is important when I do talk to people about that, I mentioned to them that the Chamber's been around for over 100 years. So you think about all the big things that have happened in the Las Vegas market in that period of time, whether you're talking about the airport, whether you're talking about the Hoover Dam, whether you're talking about gaming, we've been in the middle of all that. We've been in the middle of advocating going to Washington, D.C., and back in 1905, if anybody knows the history of Las Vegas, all there was railroads and water. When the railroads stopped going through here, we needed to have some way to get business to continue to come, otherwise the city was going to dry up, if you will. And so from that standpoint, they went to Washington, D.C. They thought about, back then when encyclopedias, black and white pictures, cactuses, they didn't know anything about the desert. They didn't know anything about the mountains. So they would bring people out here. Fortunately, they got lucky, and the Hoover Dam came. And then that's where a lot of people ended up staying. And then everything took off from there. So in the 30s, you had the airport built, and then you had the gaming industry. And then by 1945, the Chamber was involved with something called the Live Wire Fund. And the Live Wire Fund was all about destination marketing. Way back then, way before the Rat Pack, way before all those things. And by 1955, the city put together a program that you know today as the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority. So for the longest time, we were separate from them, and we did a lot for the local community, but it didn't really grow that fast until about 1990, 1995. So as we started to evolve, we became the largest and broadest business organization in the state of Nevada. And then the other things that we're talking about is the oldest and most respected. You think about long term, there are MGM, Caesars, they have not been around here. So we're proud of that. We're proud of the idea that we can take business needs and look at it historically and look at what's worked and what's not, and then also meld it with some of the things that are going on in the community. we've signed MOUs with the Convention and Visitors Authority. We've signed MOUs with the World Trade Center. And all these things factor into some of the things I do now globally because people come and talk to us immediately when they come for a show. CES is a big thing for us. So 40 businesses and community leaders serving on board of trustees. Think about who's a shaker, who's a mover in this market. You're going to have the gaming, you're going to have the Raiders and all that stuff, but we're talking about individuals. You've got an individual attorney. You're talking about a vice president of investment bankers and so forth, all the different things that make up the community. So they're actually advising us and giving us feedback, and it's been that way for some time, and that goes back to that point I was making about all the big things that go on in Vegas. These people have been stakeholders. We are integral in starting UNLV. The board chair at that time was the one that actually got that going. So the Government Affairs Committee is kind of a makeup of all that. We bring these people together, and they are the ones that influence policy. They're the ones that look at things that we do on a state level or federal level, and they sit and meet about this for about a year before legislative session, which is coming up in a couple of months. And then the Leadership Foundation, that's another thing. It's really a great thing for the local community. That's funded by the Convention and Visitors Authority, and the Chamber has been asked to implement it. So they have the Leadership Las Vegas, which, if anybody's familiar with that, is a pretty significant thing in Las Vegas. If you put yourself out there and you go through the class, it's about 9 months. It's a really tough vetting process. But when you get out of that, it's almost resume worthy. You put that on there and say, I'm the class of, and they're like, oh yeah, I graduated in this and so. So that particular element of Las Vegas is just kind of that social fiber. And I think you all can agree that Vegas never really had a social fiber. When I moved here 20 years ago, there was really nothing anybody had in common. Most people had a sports team that they followed in Pittsburgh, or I'm from Wisconsin, so it's Green Bay. But when we started to see the influx of people and the commonalities, then it changed. And I think that's where the Chamber really played an integral role. So our purpose and mission is to Nevada thrives when Nevada employees thrive. Cultivating growth and prosperity is our purpose. Relatively vague, but when we think about it, we do a lot. So it's hard for us to pin down exactly what that is. So that kind of is the top off point on that. Then the other thing is advocating to preserve economic climate necessary and employees and entrepreneurs to grow and create jobs. They're very much the same thing as it's always been. But now it's different. Now I've got people coming in from around the world that want to do business in North America. And because it's so the state is so business friendly. There's no state taxes, the subsidies and the abatements and the things that the governor's office is doing. Besides Delaware, this is the #1 place to actually incorporate your business. So if somebody's moving from the East Coast, they're coming to the West Coast, they come to Nevada. That's why you see logistics exploding in this market, because you're seeing a lot of companies coming from California, people coming from overseas, and they want to service the country. You can get anywhere in the country within 8 hours by rail or truck. So when you think about this market, it's really ideal from a cost standpoint. And the last thing about that, provide resources to small businesses. So we have so many partnerships, and how many of you heard of SCORE? Anybody? Okay, yeah. So we aren't technically partners with them, but we are in the sense that small businesses come to us and they need advice, and we will direct them to our partner SCORE, whether it's the SBA or whether it's the Workforce Task Force Development arm of the DETR with the state. All these elements are within the chamber, and we work with businesses to kind of identify it. I like to tell people that what you need today, in 6 months, you'll need something else. So it's always important to continue to educate, and because we're at the forefront of a lot of the policy that's being created, it gives us an opportunity to kind of a forecast. And that's where technology comes in, and that's why I wanted to kind of share that idea with you, because we influence, but we don't drive policy, but what we do is we testify on a lot of bills. We testify on several different bills that will have to do with workforce. We just testified at the City Hall this last week about a tax increase. And somebody here in Las Vegas, a councilman, said, hey, we want to increase the tax by 0.5 or whatever. And we said, no, that doesn't make any sense. The tourism business takes care of the bills. Let's not do that. And then we testified, and we actually shot that down. But some of the emerging sectors, I'm going to kind of fly through these, but many of you probably are familiar with the data centers and cloud infrastructure. You've seen Google, you've seen Amazon, AWS. All these things are exploding here in Las Vegas, and UNLV is at the forefront of that. And when I talk to these international companies, one of the first things I want to learn is what do they know, because much of what happens over in Europe comes here second, because there's not as much regulatory tape. And when they get here, they're kind of up to that, and they're like, okay, what do I need to know? So that's why they come to us, because legislatively they don't know the policies. They don't understand those things. 5G telecommunications. How many of you heard of MWC? Anybody? So MWC is a trade show that travels the world, and what they do is they talk about the 5G and telecommunications world. They were here in Vegas last month, and I was watching a panel that T-Mobile was putting together, and they were talking about the 5G network that they put together that will actually help service the event space. And one of the women that were on the panel were from Major League Baseball. They're talking about the automatic pitch and the strike element and having that box. And the purists in baseball, like myself, thinking, well, that's not, I'm not on board with that. But yet they're doing it. Or there was a catamaran racer from Australia that used 5G. So that's something else that you can think about. But now I was talking to a gentleman here in town that's the president of an AI company, and he was saying, I'm not interested in 5G with T-Mobile. I'm interested in the 7G that they're working on right now. And the Harry Reid Technology Park that's being built has the casino and gaming R&D. You're talking about the health R&D. You're talking about the educational element of all the R&D elements. Because these things are going on in Vegas, and a lot of people don't know it. So that's why the chamber comes in and does a lot of that educating and so forth. Autonomous and smart vehicles. Zoox taxis just rolled out on the Strip. They joined the chamber a year ago because they needed to figure out how to do business here, because in California it's completely different. So we're seeing a lot of Silicon Valley companies coming here, but they just need to figure out the lay of the land. Vay Cars. How many of you have heard of Vay Cars? Anyone? Yeah. So they're from Germany. They're here in Vegas. They tried Miami. They couldn't do it, so they're going to roll out here. And it's an autonomous car where they are in a building somewhere else in Las Vegas where there's somebody on a simulator, like those video games back in the 80s, that was my time, and you would sit there and you drive these cars around the track. Well, in this case, they're actually driving an autonomous car around the city, and when you go to the app, like an Uber or Lyft, you get that car to come to you remotely, and there's nobody in it. So then you jump in it, you use the app, you switch the vehicle's controls over to yourself, and then you drive it around, and then when you're done, you drop it off, they pick it up, and they take it to a charging station. Those sorts of technologies and those sorts of things that are coming together in Las Vegas, it's a test tube, and it's an opportunity for everybody in the city and the community. How many people are local? How many people are here from Las Vegas? Okay, quite a few. So this is an opportunity to get involved in the chamber and get on the cutting edge. A lot of what we do comes from the ideas of the business community and the business members that we have. And oftentimes I say, if we don't do it, let's figure out how we can. Because we are Vegas, and we are a Vegas chamber and one of the bigger, more influential chambers, so it's important that we think that way. Clean energy, that's a big thing too. Riot crypto mining, lithium, there's a grant that just got signed into law, and federal government gave money to the state for lithium mining. And I'm also talking to the companies that are dealing with solar, and there's big companies in town that are expanding and are exploding in the different markets. So there's a lot of opportunity, and of course with the way the climate is, it's stable. You can do a lot with it. You can do a lot with the lithium, or you can do a lot with solar up, on the way to Pahrump. They've talked about solar farms. They're even talking about doing a spaceport out there because it's a stable, and you can get earthquakes here, but you never know they're happening. So that's a good opportunity. And the logistics, I touched on it earlier, and I think that one thing about logistics that's important to remember is it's not just a warehouse. It's not just a truck. It's about all of the different ecosystems that go on around the world. You think about Switch. Switch is one of those companies that drives the world, but yet it's here in Vegas because of stability. So that's a logistics thing that actually is in place, but it really isn't thought about as that. So attracting technologies. So one of the biggest things when I talk to AI companies in town is they don't quite know how to keep these technology companies coming here. They don't know how to get the people that are already coming with the ideas from Silicon Valley that want to stay here and give them the footing to do that in STEM research and the science and the technology and all the things that go along with the Silicon Valley world. They don't have here, and they don't have those employees. So how do we do that? Well, we got to start with the schools, and we have to educate, and that's where the chamber comes in. We're involved with the workforce development, we're involved with the state, we're involved with figuring out how to actually get these students through the process so that Haas Automation, who just broke ground in Henderson, well, they're a global company. They've got a NASCAR team, they've got a Formula One team, and they have a place here in town that the president of Haas, based out of California, said to me, we're having a hard time figuring out how we're going to staff this facility. The automation that we're putting together is beyond what the people here locally are. So that's another part about the international part that's important, because these people are coming into Vegas. Let's put them in a position where they actually know that Vegas is a sticky place. And the licensing and tax environment I touched on, and I'm going to breeze through there, the Vegas factor. Who doesn't want to do business in Las Vegas? If it's a global brand and you have a global influencer like the Vegas Chamber, now you can actually do business and you can say something like that. You can put it on social media, and people in Israel or people in Turkey will see that, and it's like, oh, you're involved in Vegas? That's a value. And then skills workforce initiatives. I just touched on that, so I'm going to skip over that one. But the unified efforts in promoting technology. So you have UNLV, you have the startup community, you have NGOs, you have the state level, and you also have the federal level. There are associations with Israel, for example. It's called the Bird Foundation. You take a business here in Las Vegas, and you can partner them up with a technology company coming out of Israel, and their foundation from the partnership with the governments is giving money to these particular companies to work together. So these sort of things exist, and we just don't talk a lot about them because we're not really at that stage, but it's really becoming that way. So that's why I'm really proud to say that I'm part of the Vegas Chamber, because if it was a chamber somewhere else, I'm not sure I'd be challenged. I'm not sure I'd have an opportunity to do the things that I do and talk to the people I talk to. And it always gives me an opportunity to have good conversations and then share that information with people like yourselves. Because that information is not found everywhere. You can't find that in the newspaper. You can't find that on LinkedIn. These are anecdotal things. And so individual conversations is kind of old school, but that's really the way it needs to happen. And then once you get through the system and once it's shared, then it becomes very valuable. And then the gig economy. I mean, obviously with Uber and Lyft and all the things that are going on, that's just a natural fit to Vegas. So when you see people coming in from California or elsewhere, they just need to get a gig to work, right? And that's kind of what that's all about. So economic diversity of taking shape with technology, talking about events. This is talking about the sports element. You're talking about, for example, in March, they're going to be having a rugby tournament here at Allegiant. It started last year in March. They've committed to 10 years doing it for a week at Allegiant. And it's a big deal, obviously. I mean, in Australia, it's going to be the #1 league. It's the National Rugby League that's coming into town. So there again, they reach out to us, and we're talking about how to get them involved. And the logistics part of it, the entertainment piece of it, that's a no-brainer on that. And then the healthcare that we're working on. I mentioned UNLV has that particular element at their technology park. And these are some of just to touch on some high points of the legislative session. So every other year, the Nevada stakeholders get together and they testify at Carson City. We testify on a lot of those bills, and here are some of those numbers. You're looking at some of the bills that were submitted, how many of those bills we looked at and reread, and so forth. So this is impactful because these are the laws that stand behind technology. These are the laws that stand behind business formation and tax policy. And this is why we look at what we accomplish as an extension or a way for businesses to integrate with policy without having to worry about figuring out what to do with that. So it's the simplest things. If they shut your road down and your driveway is shut down and people can't get in and out, those are the kinds of things we talk about. We have policies and we have contacts at the state level that can help us with that sort of thing. And so 70 sectors are recommended to talk about the like logistics space, the trucking, I'm going to show you a chart here in a little bit of who else we're associated with and who we represent, the Resort Association, the Home Builders Association, the Chambers of Commerce. All of those organizations come to us and get involved with us so we can vet those bills and take them to the state level. So again, if you're not familiar with a lot of this stuff, you may see the Chamber of Commerce as a networking thing. Well, we do over 100 events a year. A lot of the stuff that we do is very big stuff. Like Preview Las Vegas is coming up in January 16th, I believe. We usually get a couple thousand people there, and it's an economic forecast show. So we get all the stakeholders in. A couple years ago, we had the president for Formula One fly in from Europe. We had the A's president last year speak. We had Fontainebleau president, the Sphere president. All these people come in, and what we do is we want to take that information and we want to disseminate it. We want to get that down, and we say, okay, what does it mean to local businesses? What does it mean to workforce? What does it mean for our economy in general? So that's a lot of what we try to look at down range. Connecting the business community. So on this, you'll see just by looking around a little bit on some of those, there's so many different areas we touch, and I'd like to look at it like the nexus of business. The government sector, the private sector, education sector, the growth of the city and the growth of the community all comes through the chamber typically. So we're connectors and we're conveners. So if there's a business that locally needs a connection with somebody that builds a website, or somebody that needs something about, I know a lot of people come to us for hospitality and they say, we'd love to have a shared program with the hospitality industry because we're building it in Lithuania, but we don't know how to do it. I had somebody ask me from Hong Kong to fly into Japan years ago because they were actually building out the gaming and hospitality industry, which piqued my interest because Japan and their Japanese culture is kind of not conducive to that. So when I heard about that, I'm thinking, yeah, I'd be interested, let's do that. So we got to that point where we were ready to go, and then we thought, well, you know what, Sands, Caesars, they're probably bidding on land over there. And if I go over there and I speak and I don't speak Japanese, can you imagine if there was some sort of misconstrued communication that affected the deal that they were working on? So those are the kinds of things that we looked at as connectors. I connect people around the world. So these are just a couple more pictures to show you what we do and the things that State of the Chamber Luncheon is coming up in a couple of weeks. We had 850 people at that last year at the Wynn. We do that every year. A lot of the stakeholders in the community, a lot of the people that are not chamber members, but they're somebody in the city, go to that because there's 40 board members that are somebody in the city that everybody needs to know, and the mayor's there, and a couple years ago we had the governor. So there's a lot of things going on, and I encourage you to look at the chamber, and I encourage you to talk more about business needs, and then come to me or come to somebody at the chamber and then talk to us about that. There's a chance that we actually have those resources. The Washington, D.C. flying, I touched on that when we fly out. So this is our vision. This is the thing that we do: economic diversification, workforce development, advocacy, and policy. It's always changing and always needing to be changed, with the administration changing, whether it's at the federal level or state level. The way we look at things is a testament to the resilience and adaptability of Las Vegas, and it's been that way for over 100 years. So that's really where we hang our hat, and we appreciate that. So anyway, this is my information. If you'd like to meet, I'm happy to consult, and I'm happy to talk about some of the things the Vegas Chamber does that can support your business. Thank you all. Thank you all for listening to me and talking about the Vegas Chamber.